Welcome in, my beautiful Virgo friends. Thank you for being here. Everything you've been through up until this moment, every difficulty that broke you open, every disappointment that forced you to rebuild, every loss that taught you what truly matters. It wasn't random, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And what you might not fully realize yet is that the preparation phase is ending. You're standing at the edge of something completely different from anything you've known before. And the version of you that exists right now is finally equipped to handle it. The ground beneath your life is about to shift in ways that will feel both terrifying and exhilarating. This isn't about small adjustments or minor improvements. This is about foundational change, the kind that alters your daily reality so completely that looking back 6 months or a year from now, you won't recognize the life you're currently living. And I know that might sound dramatic or exaggerated, but some of you are already feeling it, already sensing that something massive is building, already noticing that the structure of your existence, the patterns you've been living within, they're becoming too small to contain who you're becoming. And when containers become too small, they either expand or they shatter, and yours is about to do one or the other. Some of you might experience this through location, a move that's been brewing in the back of your mind for months or years but never felt possible or practical. And suddenly, circumstances are aligning in ways that make it not just possible but necessary. The job opportunity in another city, the relationship that requires relocation, the pull toward a place you've never been but can't stop thinking about, the lease ending at exactly the right moment, the financial pieces falling into place in ways they haven't before, and moving, truly relocating your physical life. It changes everything, not just your address, your entire nervous system, your daily rhythms, your social connections, your sense of self. And that level of change, that complete disruption of the familiar, it can feel like dying and being reborn at the same time. Like you're shedding an entire identity and stepping into something you can't fully imagine yet. This reflection invites you to consider, if you could live anywhere and be anyone without the constraints of current circumstances, what would that look like and how far is it from where you are now? Others might be experiencing massive change through relationship, and this could go multiple directions. For some, it's a connection arriving that changes everything. That shows you what partnership can actually feel like when it's right, when it's reciprocal, when it meets you at your level rather than requiring you to shrink or perform or carry more than your share. And that quality of connection, when you've never experienced it before, it rewrites your understanding of what's possible. It makes you realize how much you were settling for, how much you were accepting as normal that was actually dysfunction. But for others, the massive change is about release, about finally letting go of the relationship that's been draining you, that you've stayed in out of obligation or hope or fear of being alone. And that ending, that liberation, it might feel like grief and relief colliding, like you're mourning what you thought it could be while simultaneously breathing fully for the first time in years. There's also the possibility of career transformation, not just a new job, but a complete reorientation of how you earn, what you value, what you're willing to exchange your life force for. Because some of you have been performing roles that never fit, following paths that were chosen by younger versions of yourself, operating with limited information and different priorities. And the dissonance between who you are now and what you're doing with most of your waking hours, it's become unbearable. And maybe that unbearable pressure is exactly what's needed to finally make you move, to take the risk, to pivot, to start the business or change industries or go back to school or quit the thing that's killing your soul slowly. Because sometimes we need things to become completely intolerable before we're willing to leap into the unknown. It may feel as though multiple areas of your life are destabilizing simultaneously, and that's not coincidence. That's what massive transformation looks like. It's rarely contained to one domain because all the parts of your life are interconnected. Your relationship affects your work, affects your living situation, affects your health, affects your relationships. So when one area begins to shift dramatically, everything connected to it has to adjust, has to recalibrate, has to either evolve or fall away. And that can feel chaotic, overwhelming, like you're losing control of everything at once. But what if you're not losing control? What if you're releasing the illusion that you ever had it? And in that release, in that surrender to the reality that you can't manage and micromanage and force outcomes, there's actually a kind of relief, a kind of freedom. Some of you might be feeling resistance to this, feeling like massive change sounds exhausting, like you've already been through enough, like you just want stability and peace and for things to finally settle. And I understand that. I understand the exhaustion of constant transformation, the desire to just be still for a while, to not have to rebuild or adapt or figure out how to function in entirely new circumstances. But here's what's also true: stagnation has its own cost. Staying in structures that no longer serve you because change feels too hard, that's not actually peaceful. That's suffocation disguised as stability. And at some point, the cost of staying becomes higher than the cost of leaving. The energy required to maintain what's dying becomes greater than the energy required to birth what's trying to emerge. This reflection invites you to consider: what part of your current life are you maintaining out of genuine love versus fear of the unknown? There's something about readiness that's important to understand. You don't feel ready for massive change before it happens. You feel ready in retrospect when you look back and realize, oh, I actually did have what it took. I actually was prepared, even though I didn't know it at the time. Because readiness isn't about confidence or certainty, it's about capacity. And capacity is built through everything you've already survived, every challenge you've navigated, every time you didn't think you could handle something and then did anyway. So when I say you're ready, I'm not saying you feel ready. I'm saying you've developed the internal resources, the resilience, the wisdom, the strength to handle what's coming, even if you don't believe that yet, even if you're terrified, even if you wish you could stay where things are familiar and known. Massive change also requires massive trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the process, trust that even when you can't see the full path, taking the next visible step is enough, because that's how transformation works. You don't get the whole map up front. You get the next right action, and then the next one, and then the next one. And eventually you look back and realize you've traveled much further than you ever thought possible. But in the middle of it, when you're standing at the edge of the old and haven't yet landed in the new, when you're in that liminal space between identities or locations or relationships or careers, it requires faith. It requires believing that you're being guided or supported or held by something larger than your individual will. And whether you call that the universe or your higher self or life force or just your own unconscious wisdom doesn't matter. What matters is trusting it enough to move when it asks you to move. Some of you might also be noticing that people in your life are responding strangely to your changes, getting uncomfortable, trying to talk you out of things, questioning your decisions. And that's because your transformation threatens their stability. Your willingness to disrupt everything and start over makes them confront their own unwillingness to do the same. Your courage highlights their fear. And instead of being inspired, they become resistant. And their resistance can make you doubt yourself, can make you wonder if you're being reckless or selfish or irresponsible. But here's what's true: the people who truly love you will support your growth even when it's uncomfortable for them, even when your changing means they have to change, even when your evolution requires them to either evolve alongside you or accept that you're moving in different directions. Inhale. It can seem as if everything you've built is about to be dismantled, and in some ways that might be accurate. But dismantling isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's liberation. Sometimes you have to take apart the structure you created 5 or 10 years ago with different resources and different understanding so you can build something that actually fits who you are now. And that taking apart, that deconstruction, it's sacred work. It's necessary work, even when it's painful, because you can't build the new while clinging to the old. You can't step into transformation while maintaining your grip on everything familiar. At some point, you have to let go. You have to release. You have to make space for what's trying to arrive by releasing what's no longer meant to stay. This reflection invites you to consider: what would you build if you weren't limited by what you've already built? And does that vision excite or terrify you more? There's also something here about identity death, about recognizing that who you've been, the role you've played, the story you've told about yourself, it's ending. And that ending might feel like loss, even when what's coming is better, because we get attached to our identities even when they're limiting, even when they're based on old wounds or outdated circumstances, even when they're keeping us small, and letting those identities die so new ones can emerge. That requires grief, real grief. Not bypassing it with toxic positivity or spiritual platitudes about everything happening for a reason, but actually mourning what's ending, honoring what that version of you accomplished, acknowledging how hard they tried with what they had, and then releasing them with love so you can become who you're meant to be next. Some of you might be wondering how to prepare for massive change when you don't know exactly what form it will take. And the answer is you prepare internally more than externally. You work on your flexibility, your trust, your ability to stay grounded when everything around you is shifting, your capacity to not know and be okay with not knowing, your willingness to feel uncomfortable without immediately trying to fix or escape or numb the discomfort. Because massive change doesn't require you to have all the answers. It requires you to be able to sit with questions, to be able to navigate uncertainty, to be able to trust yourself to figure things out as they unfold rather than needing the whole plan mapped out before you take the first step. It may feel as though you're being asked to choose between security and authenticity, between staying safe and staying true, between what's comfortable and what's calling you. And that's a real tension. I'm not going to pretend there's an easy answer because choosing transformation means accepting risk, means acknowledging that things might not work out the way you hope, means being willing to potentially fail or struggle or face judgment. But it also means being alive, really alive, not just going through motions or playing roles or sleepwalking through a life that looks good on paper but feels empty in your body. And at some point, you have to decide which kind of life you can actually live with, the safe but soul deadening one, or the risky but authentic one. This reflection invites you to consider, if you were at the end of your life looking back, which would you regret more, the changes you made or the changes you didn't make? There's also practical preparation that matters. Getting your finances in order as much as possible, building savings if you can, strengthening your support system, developing skills that increase your adaptability, doing the logistical groundwork that makes massive change slightly less chaotic. And while you can't control everything, you can control some things. And controlling what you can, preparing where you're able, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than. That's not about lack of faith, that's about responsibility. Because faith and practicality aren't opposites. You can trust the process while also doing your part to set yourself up for success. You can surrender to not knowing while also taking care of the knowable details. You can leap while also checking if there's a parachute available. Some of you might also need to hear that massive change doesn't have to happen all at once, that you can take it in stages, that you can move gradually even when the overall transformation is dramatic. Because sometimes we get paralyzed thinking we have to burn everything down immediately, have to quit the job and end the relationship and move across the country all in the same week. But you don't. You can be strategic, can sequence things, can take one step and then pause and integrate before taking the next one. The point isn't speed, the point is alignment. The point is moving in the direction of what's true, even if that movement is slow, even if it takes months or years to fully complete the transition. What matters is that you've stopped pretending, stopped settling, stopped choosing safety over authenticity. And once you've made that internal shift, the external changes will unfold at whatever pace is right for you. It may feel as though time is accelerating, like things are moving faster than they used to, like the gap between wanting something and having it show up, between sensing what needs to change and circumstances forcing that change. It's compressed, and that's not your imagination. When you reach certain thresholds in your development, when you've done enough internal work, when you're clear enough about what matters is less than #0, 5 hash is greater than the external world responds more quickly. The lag time between intention and manifestation decreases. So if it feels like everything is happening at once, like you can barely catch your breath between one massive shift and the next, that's not chaos, that's momentum. That's what it feels like when you finally stop resisting the current and start moving with it. when you stop fighting your own evolution and start cooperating with it. And here's what you need to understand above everything else: you are ready for this. Not because you feel confident, not because you have it all figured out, not because you're certain about outcomes, but because you've survived everything that's brought you to this point, because you've developed strength you don't even recognize yet, because you've been building capacity through every challenge and heartbreak and moment of doubt. And that capacity, that resilience, that wisdom, it's what makes massive change possible. It's what allows you to not just survive transformation, but to thrive in it, to find yourself on the other side more whole, more authentic, more aligned than you've ever been. So if massive change is coming, if you're sensing it or already in the middle of it, if your entire life is being reorganized in ways you never planned or predicted, trust it. Trust yourself. Trust that you're being guided towards something that serves your highest evolution, even when you can't see it yet, even when it's scary, even when everyone around you thinks you're making a mistake. Because the life you're meant to live, the full expression of who you actually are, it's worth whatever temporary discomfort this transformation requires. It's worth the risk and the uncertainty and the fear. And you are ready. You are so ready. Even if you don't believe it yet, let the change come. Let yourself be transformed and trust that who you're becoming is exactly who you're meant to be. This reflection invites you to consider: what would the most courageous version of yourself do right now? And how close are you to becoming that person?